Hello and welcome to the MB Om podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MB Om podcast. I'm super excited to have you guys here today and to share this awesome episode with you. Today I'm being joined by special guest Amber Berry. Amber is a yoga teacher and yoga studio owner that I know here in Atlanta, Georgia. She is the owner and founder of Westside Yoga, which is on the west side of Atlanta. And it's a studio that I was introduced to by a friend that I met at Lululemon Run Club. And she told me about this awesome new power yoga studio that I had to check out if I was new to the city. And so I went to the studio. It's an absolutely beautiful location. Amber's done a fabulous job on the studio itself. Her hashtag for the studio is #happyplace. And when you walk in, you just really do get that vibe. And so when I started the podcast, I really wanted to have Amber on to talk about her journey as a yoga teacher, what inspired her to create a yoga studio, and then some of the things that just are involved with opening a studio, like finding a location, getting teachers, making a profit, and running a business, which is something that can be a lot more complex than a lot of people maybe think about before diving into actually doing it. And so I'm really excited to have Amber here with me today. We actually did the interview in the Westside Yoga studio, so it was awesome to be talking about the studio and its growth and its birth and everything having to do with it while being right there. So without further ado, here's Amber. All right. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, Amber. It's super cool to have you right in front of me.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, it's so rare that I actually get to talk to people face to face, and it's always cooler when you can actually be with someone. And to be in your studio, which is a big topic of today's conversation, is also really cool. I thought we'd start with how you got into yoga.
I discovered yoga in the late 90s. I had been in a car accident and had broken a lot of bones in my body. I had to learn how to walk again and was in physical therapy for about 4 or 5 months. And my insurance ran out, and they told me that I would have to start doing self-pay, which I couldn't afford at the time. And the therapist said, well, maybe you should try some yoga classes. And I didn't know what yoga was, and there were only 2 yoga studios in Atlanta, I think, at the time.
Wow.
And it was difficult to find a class, but I found one actually at my gym that I already had a membership to, and started taking classes on Tuesday nights. And the first class was intimidating because I couldn't do half of the postures because of my injuries. And the ones I could do made me cry because it was so painful. I had so much scar tissue.
Wow.
But when the class was over, I felt like a different person. And it was the first time I had felt hopeful in a long time about my recovery. I was convinced that I would be dealing with this pain for the rest of my life, that I would never get my flexibility back, that I would never feel strong again. And it was the first time I thought that maybe I could get back to where I was before the accident.
That's amazing. And were you kind of just hooked on it from there, or?
I was. There was a little voice inside that said, you're going to do this for the rest of your life. And I just knew. And my teacher's name was Joy, which was amazing because that was my mother's name. And my mother had actually passed about a year before I took my first yoga class and right before the accident. And it just seemed like it couldn't be a coincidence. And she was this amazing, inspiring woman who I just remember looking at her and thinking, I want to be her someday. And it was silly because I was the least accomplished person in the class, but I just in my heart felt like I was supposed to do what she was doing.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and she became a mentor and someone that I still keep up with and really admire.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful story. Yeah. And at what point did that transfer into teaching yoga?
So I was taking classes on Tuesday nights, And I asked Joy about how I could do more, and she recommended a couple books and a video that was on Oxygen, the Oxygen Network, with a teacher named Steve Ross. It was called Inhale with Steve Ross. It was on at 6 a.m. every weekday morning, and I just was thirsty for more, and so I actually started getting up at 5:55 on weekday mornings before my corporate job and practicing yoga with Steve Ross, and my husband would join me, and it became a really good way for us to connect. And I remember at one point looking down during my practice with him and noticing that I had muscles in my legs that I had never had before, because I had not been athletic before the crash, and thinking I just felt so strong after just maybe 2 months of practicing 5 or 6 days a week.
Wow. And
it just kept feeding itself. The more I did, the more I changed, and I became someone I didn't even think I could become in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah. That's really cool.
It was inspiring.
Yeah. And then you continued to practice for a couple of years before you decided to do a teacher training?
I did. I kept practicing with Steve and with Joy, and there were no other options at the time. You have to remember, this was a very different era.
Yeah.
And there was this little voice inside me that said, you have to share this with people, because there's so few people teaching this practice, and people deserve to know how powerful it is.
Yeah.
And there were no teachers training certification programs at the time.
Wow, that's so crazy to think about.
And so what happened was, I was working for a .com, and we got bought by another company, and they laid off the entire marketing team. And I decided to use that time to try my hand at marketing consulting. And I tried that for about 8 or 9 months and didn't really enjoy it, and started having this idea that maybe I should just teach yoga.
Yeah.
And so I walked into LA Fitness down the street from my house, and I said, I want to teach yoga. And they said, okay, you're hired. And it was kind of a joke, because yoga classes were just starting to emerge in health clubs, and no one really took it very seriously. And so I got what I wanted, and then I was terrified. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do this now. I'd never done any kind of public speaking, and didn't really know what I got myself into. So I started sitting in front of the videos of Steve Ross and writing down everything he said, and he never used the names of poses. And so when I started teaching, I didn't know any of the names of the poses. And I had note cards that I prepared for my first class. And then this was 2001, and 9/11 happened 2 days before my first class.
Wow.
And 9/11 happened, and, I spent 2 days just trying to process through that, and then remembered that I was supposed to teach a yoga class.
Yeah.
And got back to my note cards, and in my mind, it seemed almost silly in light of what had happened. And I was having such mixed emotions, because I was so scared and so nervous, and felt an obligation to follow up on my word, to do the thing I said I would do, but I really didn't want to teach it.
Yeah.
And, but I did. I showed up on time, and 2 people came to class, and I was the worst teacher ever, looking down at my notes the whole time, shaking, not really sure what I was doing. But they seemed to enjoy it, and we connected on a level that was very necessary at that time.
Yeah.
And we were able to find similarities with these 2 strangers that I would have not have otherwise had in my life. And so it was a really beautiful experience, and I'm really thankful. But it was one of those things I never thought I would find myself in that place, or that I would become a yoga teacher, but I just felt called.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that story, and getting up there with your note cards and just pushing through that fear. It's terrifying to stand in front of people and try to direct them through these poses and have them just stare at you.
There's so much going on in your mind when you teach your first class. You're nervous about being judged. You're nervous about not being good enough. You have to remember the sequencing. You have to remember the breathing. You have to remember to integrate it all.
Yeah.
You have to be entertaining.
Yeah.
And there's so much going on at the same time. And back then, I thought it was about trying to do everything right. And I was a bit of a perfectionist. And so it was a little bit of a checklist in my mind. And the thing that has evolved over years of my teaching is realizing it's more about connecting with the audience and trusting that you have everything you need to provide an edifying experience.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you can step out of your own fear and just be present with the people in the room, then that's what makes a really great class.
Yeah, for sure. And so obviously your first experience didn't scare you away. You continued teaching. What was that progression like?
It did scare me. And it was, again, such an interesting feeling because I just knew I had to keep going back. Mm-hmm. And it was just necessary. And I felt really strongly that people needed to connect with this practice. And if no one else was going to do it, it needed to be me.
Yeah.
And so I taught at that LA Fitness, which was a really small LA Fitness, and then they opened a really large club up at the perimeter and asked me to be the teacher for that club. And so I went from a really small room to a huge room.
Wow.
That was almost as big as our studio here.
Yeah.
And grew those classes. It started with just 3 or 4 people in the room, and I grew them to 75 students.
Wow.
On Tuesday and Thursday nights in about 6 months.
That's amazing.
And I loved it. It was fun. I made these awesome playlists that we just kind of danced and had a big old party. But then I started getting a little nervous. I had so many people in the room. I didn't know how to do adjustments.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know the names of the poses. And so I started getting nervous that somebody might get hurt, even though I was very mindful and paid attention to everyone in the room. And I could kind of see if somebody was doing something that was going to hurt them. Like, I'm very good with looking at someone's body and making sure it's aligned, but it still made me nervous. And so I started asking around, and I saw an ad, I think in Yoga Journal, for a teacher training program. And it turned out that it was 3 miles from my house, and it was the only one in the Southeast at the time. It was at Peachtree Yoga Center. And so I applied for the teacher training because I just knew I was going to do this for the rest of my life and figured I might as well go ahead and get a certification.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. It's interesting. I've heard so many stories while doing this podcast about people who have just started teaching, like self-taught, just started teaching, like 15 to 20 years ago. And it's interesting to me as somebody who's come into the yoga world in the last couple of years, and it seems so different, which is really cool.
It has changed a lot, and it's been really interesting for me to watch the progression. Mm-hmm. And thinking of what I hoped for and seeing what it looks like today. And
yeah,
it's been a fascinating journey for sure.
Yeah. What are some of the main things you've learned over your years as a teacher?
As far as, there's so much.
So from the time you started as a teacher to what you know now, you've been teaching for 17 years, yeah?
15
years.
Practicing 18.
Yeah. What are some of the main things you've learned, I guess, like business-wise, and then as a teacher?
Well, business-wise, this whole practice is about remembering that we're already happy. And so to run a successful yoga studio, you have to create an environment that fosters happiness. And so I work really hard to eliminate the barriers to happiness.
Yeah.
In our yoga classes, setting a tone that everyone is welcome, encouraging our students to get to know each other, making sure that everything is clean and welcoming, looking students in the eye and really seeing them and making an effort to remember their name and call them by name when I can, taking an interest in what they're hoping to accomplish. Things that remind people that happiness is closer than it seems. And then as a teacher, I think the biggest thing I've learned is that we are all connected at our core, and everyone can feel successful in this practice. And sometimes our monkey mind, as my teacher calls it, takes us down paths that discount people's abilities or make us doubt that some students might not be able to accomplish certain things. And I've learned to dismiss those thoughts and really believe that everyone in the room is capable of taking this practice as far as they want to. Because when I believe that, they can feel that energy. It transfers to them. And there is a subtle inspiration that helps them get more out of their experience here. And so I believe very much that what the teacher is thinking about the students affects the quality of their experience.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing. I love that, because it's like if you put limiting beliefs on somebody who already has limiting beliefs on themselves.
Right, and don't we all?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that, like, I can't do that. Like, you look at somebody doing an advanced asana, it's like, I can't do that.
Right.
And when you just encourage the playfulness and you can do it if you try.
Right, and that's the first line in the Yoga Sutras, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, is yoga is the calming of the mind stuff. And we learn to watch our thoughts and separate the ones that serve us from the ones that don't. And if I'm not doing that as a teacher, then I don't see how our students ever could learn to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder.
I feel like that's our role as instructors, as guides, is to separate our own thoughts and choose the ones that empower us and empower our students.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Did you always want to own a yoga studio? Like, how long has that been a dream of yours?
It's really funny because none of this has ever been a want. It's always been a knowing that this was my purpose.
Okay.
I found my purpose when I started teaching yoga, and I've always known that I'm here to help others discover what I discovered.
Yeah.
Because of the difficulties I went through, they all happened for a reason.
Yeah.
So that I could speak to my experience to help others get healthy and happy. And so it's funny because it feels very different than what you see in the movies or what you might think it would feel like. Because yes, maybe my ego has wanted to own a yoga studio, but more than that, I've just known that this is how I can find true happiness in life, is to serve others. And so I've always known that I should open a yoga studio, and I tried for a very long time to figure out the logistics and make it work for my family, because I do have 3 children, and it just didn't make business sense until I found this very unique situation that we're in. But it was about 5 years ago, I was on my mat with my teacher in Ojai, California, and I heard this voice in my head that said, you need to speak louder. And I was teaching and doing nutrition coaching, and I decided to start a blog. And so I started a blog because this voice was like, you need to be speaking louder.
Yeah.
And then the next year when I went back to see Steve, I heard this voice, you need to open a studio.
That's so cool.
And I'll never forget it, because I approached him after class and I was like, I really think I'm supposed to open a studio. And he said, just be really sure that's what you want. Or something to that effect. But it was just really like, are you sure that's, a good thing for you to do? And a little bit of a word of caution.
Yeah.
But that, I think, was when I just knew that it had to happen.
Yeah.
And that was when I started teaching out of my house. Okay. And so I cleared out my basement and started teaching yoga classes out of my house.
Cool.
And did that for a couple of years, and I was just really happy when I found this space.
So you were kind of like looking for a space sort of passively at that point?
Yeah, and it was just always, we would drive by all these different locations, and I would say to my husband, "Oh, that would make a great yoga studio," and it was just kind of this ongoing, and it was a someday thing.
Mm-hmm. Like when the time's right, sort of like I'll know, or
yeah, and that's one of the things I would tell anyone: if you know you want to do it, work as hard as you possibly can to do it as quickly as you can. If you just know, because I knew, mm-hmm. and I do wish that maybe I had believed a little more in myself to make it happen sooner.
Yeah.
I do believe that everything has unfolded the way it was meant to unfold for me, but my advice to someone who thinks they want to open a studio would be to go above and beyond to try to make it work if you know that that's your calling.
Yeah.
You don't want to waste any time.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the things that pop up. I find the yoga practice is so beautiful for the way your mind sort of reacts. Like I'll call them like shavasana thoughts. Like sometimes I'll have these really like aha moments almost, and then you kind of get out of them and you can be like, oh, that was a bit like I don't know where my brain was at. And I feel like sometimes your mind is telling you something, and to really like go with that.
And I think that's our true mind. I think of life as placing veils. I imagine you're like veils over reality.
Yeah.
And the further away I get from my yoga practice, the more barriers there are to me seeing clearly. And that's why I practice every day, because I have the most clarity when I'm meeting my mat every day. And almost every blog I've ever written started on my yoga mat. And most every wonderful idea I've ever had started on my yoga mat since I started practicing. And so I just feel like I think of my practice as the thing that strips away the barriers to me being healthy, happy, and successful in life, and ultimately serving my purpose. And I think that's what we all want at our core, is to be living a purposeful life.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And in terms of actually opening the studio, so finding the space was obviously a big key aspect, somewhere that's close enough to your house that you can get there quickly, something in the right price range. What was that process like?
It was something that I had contemplated for many, many years, but I always knew that if the bottom line didn't make sense, that it wasn't worth doing, and I didn't want to do it unless I could do it really, really well. And so I would drive around town, and the dreamer in me would see places that would be a perfect yoga studio, and I'd get really excited, and I'd call about the rent, and then reality would set in, and I'd run some numbers and realize that by the time I paid my teachers and paid my rent, that it would be a break-even proposition. So the question was, how do I find a space that makes sense for everybody involved so that I can pay my teachers what I think they deserve and still be able to turn a profit, something that would feel meaningful.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult, and it took a long time, and I asked a lot of questions and thought about it a lot, prayed about it a lot, ran a lot of numbers, and then found the space where I'm in now. And that was another example of just asking questions and being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
But you have to set yourself up for that. You have to make yourself available. And so there was a space I had been watching close to my house, and it was an abandoned building, and the owner wouldn't rent me the space. I had talked to him, but I had heard that the building had been sold. And so the first time I saw a car out in front of the space, I knocked on the door, and the new owner answered, and I asked him what he was doing with the space downstairs, and he said, "It's my yoga studio." And I said, "Well, who's running it for you?" And he said, "I don't know yet. I'm trying to get my medical business open on the other side of the building." And I said, "Well, I'd like to run it." And he said, "Make me a proposition." And so I did. I spent an entire weekend writing a presentation and met with him and convinced him that I was the perfect person to help him build out the studio within his medical practice. And he said he believed me and the space was mine, and I just ran with it. I signed the lease in July, and we opened our doors September 16th, so it was about 6 weeks
That's
from that
amazing.
meeting. Because once I finally had the opportunity after thinking about it for so long, I knew exactly what needed to happen, and it was such an interesting process because I kind of thought that maybe I would finally find a space and then I wouldn't be sure how to make it a reality. But after thinking about it for so long, I just knew every step of the way what had to happen.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's like such a crazy story to hear. Just like, you know, the space just comes to be and he's like, yeah, it's going to be my yoga studio, but I don't have anyone to run it.
It was, and I don't believe in coincidences. I think that our energies all work together for the greater good, and if we're open to that, that really beautiful things can happen.
Yeah.
And it was really clear that it was the right thing because it's half a mile from my house where I live.
Mm-hmm.
I've been teaching yoga in the community for 15 years. I was teaching out of my house for a while, so I already had some customers in the neighborhood. And it's a walkable area with a lot of apartment complexes. We probably have 6 or 7 apartment complexes within a walking distance of the studio. A lot of restaurants.
Right off the
retail.
interstate.
Right off the interstate.
Yeah.
We have tons of parking. It's free. We don't charge for parking. And so it was just a combination. You have to think about all these different variables. You know, where are my students going to park? Is the location easily accessible? Is the building itself desirable? I've seen a lot of people open studios in a space because the space was affordable, but the students ultimately didn't enjoy coming to practice because it was dirty or it was old or it was moldy. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to be completely sure of what you're getting into and that everything is working exactly the way you expect it to, because once you open your doors, things will not go the way you expect them to. And so if you have a solid foundation of the space lining up in the way that feels appropriate, then the rest you can work out. But if you start off with a space that you don't entirely love, you could be facing a downhill battle. I mean, it can be really, really difficult because there's so many unexpected things that happen when you open a business that you have to make sure you're as aligned as possible before you open your doors.
Yeah, and having a space that you want to come to, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and it's funny because my teacher always talks about how the whole point of yoga is to achieve samadhi or bliss, and this practice will make you happy if you let it. And so, as kind of a joke, I was telling one of my friends we should call this the happy place because it's where you come to get happy. But I was kidding at first, but it truly is my happy place, and I can't wait to get here when I wake up in the morning, and I'm a little bit sad to leave at night. It's funny, after I teach in the evenings, it always takes me about half an hour to get myself out of the studio because I want to make sure that everything's all set up for the next day, but I think I also just enjoy being here so much that sometimes I don't want to leave the energy. There's really good energy after the evening classes, and it really truly is a happy place, and I think our students feel the same too, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like it's kind of like what you convey, like what you bring to it, you know, as like an owner.
It's what you believe.
And your teachers. Yeah, definitely.
And I believe this is a happy place, and it's impossible for our students not to pick up on that if I'm teaching from that space.
But what was the actual process of opening the studio? So you have this space now, you have yourself. Did you have any teachers in mind right away, or a schedule?
The process, it was such an out-of-body experience because I didn't know what I was doing. I do have some business experience, and I was in marketing for 11 years, so it really was just a very prayerful, intuitive journey where I would just get up in the morning and I'd be like, okay, what do I need to get done today? And I would just go. And I would just like go. And the answers just kept appearing. Like what I need to do next. And I would call people that I thought could help me. I have a large network of friends and business acquaintances, having lived in Atlanta for over 20 years. And so I called a friend of mine who I know does graphic design, and I said, would you create a logo for me? And I called a friend of mine who's an interior designer and asked her to help me pick a paint color, and she offered to design the whole studio.
Cool.
And trade for classes, which was great because she's amazing. And so it was just, it's hard to explain. It was just one of these things. I wanted to get my doors open as quickly as possible. I gave myself 6 weeks, which really is so little time.
Yeah, that's not very much time at all.
Kind of crazy in hindsight.
Yeah.
But I signed the lease in July. We opened in September.
Wow.
And just, I get up in the morning, I do my practice, and then the rest of the day it was just figuring out what else we needed to do to make this thing happen by September 16th.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and just talking to everyone I knew, like, this has grown very organically. It's been very much word of mouth, and just letting my neighbors know what I'm doing and asking for help. I asked for a lot of help, and that's one thing I would suggest to anyone trying to open a studio is don't be afraid to ask for help. And it's something that I've not been good at in my life. I'm very independent. Mm-hmm. And so it was a very humbling experience to call on my friends and say, I really need help.
Wow. Good for you. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm getting much better.
I feel you. I'm a very I'm good. I've got it. I'm fine on my own type person. So I can definitely relate to that feeling. It's hard for me to be I actually really need you to help me.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because I did do a lot on my own. And that's the other thing, opening a yoga studio. Know that there's going to be a lot of work you do on your own. And it can be really lonely sometimes, but you just have to do it. It's a whatever it takes attitude. You have to just believe I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this a dream come true.
Yeah. Did you feel a lot of pressure when you first started it? You know, it's your baby, you're growing it. A lot of pressure in terms of making sure that classes are running smoothly and that your teachers were sort of sticking with what you had in your vision and that sort of thing?
It's never been about me. Mm-hmm. It's very much about serving the community in a way that honors my experience. In yoga, we have this idea of satya, or truthfulness, always seeking the truth, and that has been a constant for me in my life. I'm very curious, and I'm always seeking answers, and I always have to know exactly what the truth is.
Yeah.
And so the pressure was more about honoring the truth about this practice and the truth that connects us all. And so in hiring teachers, I was terrified because when I opened, I wanted to open with a full schedule. Yeah. Because the truth about owning a yoga studio is people have to be able to rely on you. Yeah. And so the classes had to be at the same time every day. And you have to have enough classes that people feel like they can drop in when they want to. And so the pressure was knowing that we had to have at least 30 classes a week on the schedule, and knowing that I could only teach so many. Yeah. And knowing that I didn't have a lot of other instructors that I knew that teach in a way that aligns with what I know a lot of yoga instructors, but my vision is different than a lot of what is taught in Atlanta, and it comes from my experience in California with the instructors that I've worked with. Yeah. And so that was the struggle, was wanting to respect my friends that are yoga teachers enough to not pressure them to teach the way I envision it, but believing really strongly. It was this push and pull, knowing that the message I'm supposed to deliver is this idea that yoga should be fun and accessible and rewarding for everyone. Yeah. And that you have to get hot and sweaty on your mat. Yeah. Pretty much every day to truly transform your life. And trying to figure out where to get those teachers. Could I convince teachers that are teaching one way to teach a different way? Mm-hmm. Do I need to train teachers? How is I going to make this happen? And And not wanting to step on anyone's toes or make anyone feel bad about the way they teach, because it's not wrong to teach differently than how we teach.
Yeah.
It's just different, and just knowing that my purpose is to share this message and my experience and finding people that align in that way. So, but in hindsight, it all unfolded exactly as it was supposed to. I mean, yes, there were a lot of nights that I went to bed going, how am I going to pull this off? But in hindsight, all the people that were supposed to come showed up, like you. And I love our team. I feel like we have a very cohesive group that knows exactly why they're here and what their purpose is, and they support the vision.
Yeah.
So I always, my mantra is trust the struggle.
Yeah.
And I feel like I lived that in the opening of the studio, trusting the struggle, and was able to maintain equanimity even though it was a very challenging time.
Yeah.
And I'm really thankful for the experience now. In hindsight, I feel like we have stability in the studio, and if we hadn't struggled in the beginning, it wouldn't be as meaningful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I love all of that. And thank you for sharing with such authenticity. I appreciate that as well. What was your opening day like? Like, what did that feel like for you? I feel like it must have been so surreal.
It felt like I had 5,000 things to do. And it was definitely a yoga practice in and of itself, in that I had to take it one breath at a time. Mm-hmm. It was really exciting, but no matter how much work you put into your opening day, you don't feel totally ready, even in the minutes before you open your doors. I mean, I still felt like there was so much more I could have done, but it was perfect in hindsight. It was beautiful and surprising, and I had set my expectations low. I thought, well, if 30 people show up, that'll be good, and that would be mostly my friends and family.
Yeah.
If 40 people come, I'll be thrilled. If 50 come, I'll be, really, really happy. And we had over 100 people
That's amazing.
show up, and it was such a funny experience because I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
And a few people came early. Some of my friends came and brought gifts and came to give me a hug. And then people just started coming in the door. And I kept waiting for it to stop, and they just kept coming and coming and coming. And we are zoned for 70 yoga mats, and we actually had 75 people practice that night. Don't tell the fire marshal. And then some people just stopped by to say hello. But I had a friend who was here, and she was counting heads, and she said it was over 100 people.
Wow.
That came, and it was one of the most fun practices I've ever been a part of, because the energy was so high. When you have that many people together for a celebratory occasion, it's just contagious. And so we just laughed, and it was funny because people were bumping into each other because the mats were so close together. And I told everyone just to get really comfortable and really friendly with their neighbors. But it was just a joyful experience.
That's so cool. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
That must have been like such a dream come true for you. Like, I did it. Like,
it was, and it was interesting though that it was different than I expected. Mm-hmm. And it just felt very aligned. Everything since we opened our doors has felt very aligned with who I am and what I know to be my purpose. And it's different because we think that living our purpose feels like never-ending bliss, and to me it feels more like contentment. Like, yes, everything is exactly as it should be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's a different kind of happiness.
That's cool. That's cool
awesome
to hear.
That's great.
And what were some of the challenges as the studio has grown, and just over the last sort of 7 months that the studio has been alive?
One of the challenges for me was being really clear about our mission of making yoga fun and accessible and rewarding for everyone who comes in the door. Because our classes are for all levels, it's really difficult to teach an all levels yoga class and do it in a way that everyone feels comfortable and accepted and happy when they leave.
Yeah.
So it was a really tall order, what I was asking of my teachers, and it was challenging to get us all on the same page, and we all have personal preferences in how we like to practice and how we like to teach, and I also wanted to be respectful of my teachers because they're all amazing and they're all great teachers, but I also need them to be aligned with what we're teaching, because I want to be a place where people feel like they can drop in and it doesn't matter who's teaching. Mm-hmm. You know, everyone will have their favorite teacher, but I want to be a drop-in studio where people keep their mat in the back of their car and they know that our classes are at the same time every day, mm-hmm. most days of the week. And they just come when they feel inspired to come.
Yeah.
And so trying to create a group of teachers that was aligned in that manner was challenging, but we've actually been more successful in that than I even expected. It's been really interesting, and I learned a lot of lessons myself about lowering my expectations a little and giving people freedom to grow in their teaching in the way that's appropriate for them.
Yeah.
Letting go of the idea that I have to be in charge of it, but giving them the freedom to move in their own direction as long as they're still aligned with the mission of the studio.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really wonderful experience for me to watch my thought processes and recognize that it doesn't always have to be my way.
Yeah.
That it can still be a really great experience, even if it's not 100% what I expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I think that I would struggle with as well if I was to open my own yoga studio. Like, expectations, I think, are something that everyone struggles with. Like, you get something in your head and then it's different and you feel a certain way about it, whether it's good or bad. And then also just you have it in your head that you want it to be a certain way, and then wanting to execute it that way.
Right.
Yeah, that can be challenging.
Yeah, and building a team is challenging too, you know, trying to figure out what's going to motivate my teachers so that they're really happy when they walk in the door.
Yeah.
And but we're helping each other. We're now at a point where in the beginning I was the owner of the studio, and you know, I was managing through that, but we're really at a point now where we're talking to each other a lot and hearing each other's feedback, and I value the feedback of my teachers. I think that's really important, to value the teachers.
Yeah. So
that you can both be committed to each other. And if you have that as the leadership of your studio, people want to be involved with that. Clients want to be more involved in the studio where everyone's aligned and respectful of each other, instead of someone who's coming to work because it's a job.
Yeah. Has it been hard at all as a studio owner in terms of like hiring people, and then like there's this trust aspect that they're going to show up when they're supposed to show up at the time they're supposed to show up? Has that been hard?
A little bit, but I think there are things we can do as studio owners to manage that process in a respectful way. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I did in the beginning was I would text my teachers and just say, hey, just confirming that you're going to be there tomorrow at
Mm-hmm.
6 a.m. I hope you have a great class.
Yeah.
And so that was two things. That was confirming that we had three things, actually. One, that I had communicated effectively about what was expected, that they were reminded if they had happened to forget.
Yeah.
And I also had the opportunity to wish them well and let them know that I'm cheering for them, because I am always cheering for my teachers. I want them to be successful in their classes.
Yeah.
And I want them to feel like it was a worthwhile experience to have shown up and taught every time they come to the studio. So
yeah, definitely.
I think that actually is not one of the harder parts, in my opinion, if you are communicative. Mm-hmm. Communication is really key.
Yeah.
And I send a lot of emails to my teachers, not as much now as I did in the beginning, but in the beginning I was emailing like every other day or every couple of days about expectations around the classes. Mm-hmm. And studio management, which I kept really simple, which that's another really important thing, is when you set up a studio, you have to make it easy for your teachers to show up, flip on the lights, turn on the music, and teach.
Yeah.
And so I handle a lot of the things, like in the beginning, making sure that the bathrooms were stocked and making sure the humidifier was filled and the diffuser was filled. Like, I would try to take as much of a burden off my teachers, even though that was more of a burden on me. Mm-hmm. It's what you have to do as the owner, and no one in the beginning is as invested as you are. And so until I had my teachers more invested, I took on the things that were less desirable, folding the blankets, straightening the props. But now that my teachers are invested, I'm noticing, like, I don't even know who it is, but somebody keeps filling the humidifier. Somebody's
it's always full when I'm here.
Yeah,
so.
But it's been really lovely to watch that happen, because it shows me how much my teachers care about the quality of the experience here.
Yeah.
But you have to earn it. And so I think just recognizing that you're going to have a few months of a lot of really hard, tedious work, making sure the quality of the experience is good, that eventually your team will pick up some of those responsibilities and take the burden off you. And I do feel like I have a situation now where my teachers want to take some of the burden off me because they've seen how committed I've been.
Yeah. I think I almost think about it as in, like, sort of renting your own house versus, like, owning your own house. Like, when you rent it and it's somebody else's, you might be tidy, you might be clean, but you're not going to have that extra level of care because it's not like your own.
Right.
The more you're invested in it, the more you're like, I really want to take care of this. I really want it to be great. I want it to always look good.
Right. And that's one of the things I've noticed with yoga studios, is that in some studios, teachers seem to come and go pretty often. Mm-hmm. And I haven't felt like some teachers had a sense of pride about where they teach. They just wanted to teach classes. And it was really important to me that my teachers have a sense of pride about teaching here.
Yeah.
That they feel like this is their home, and they have people behind them supporting them.
Yeah.
And so I do believe if you come from that place, that your actions follow. If you believe that in all your heart when you open a studio, that you're building a home for your teachers, that it'll fall in line eventually if you just keep showing up and doing the things to make it feel like a home.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really beautiful thing to create for people. So I think, like, teachers come and go, right? They teach at multiple different studios. It's nice to feel like there's somewhere where you can just be, and it is like a home, and it's not just like a place where you're coming to be and work for an hour.
Yeah, well, and you can look at it at the micro level, or you can look at it at the macro level, and then taking it beyond just the studio. We live in a community that hasn't had a yoga studio ever, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And I've been really involved with the community and the local schools for a long time, and I have a lot of pride about living in Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta over 20 years ago and felt like this was my home more than any place I had ever lived. I mean, the minute I stepped foot in this city, I felt a connection that I've never felt anywhere else in the world besides Italy. I feel very connected when I go to Italy.
Italy's amazing.
So I've always had this sense of pride about living in Atlanta and how much progress this city has made in the past 100 years. And so on a bigger level, I really wanted something that would edify the community, something that would change the culture, that would help the people who live around us live a healthier life and a happier life, because it all flows. And when people visit the city of Atlanta, they pick up on whether people enjoy living here or not.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
So I feel an opportunity to make Atlanta even better than it already is. And so all of this teamwork is essential to be able to change the culture in our city. And I just really believe that we can. And I actually have some friends who work in the local government, and I'm having lunch with one of them next week, and I want to talk about how we can bring more health and wellness events to the city of Atlanta through the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I'd love for Atlanta to be the LA of the East Coast, the place where you go for wellness retreats and getaways, and you come back from Atlanta feeling healthier, which has not always been what we're known for. We're known for some of that good old-fashioned Southern food.
Yeah.
But I feel like the timing is right for us to start to shift that. So it's it starts with the studio, but there's such a bigger thing.
Yeah,
that
definitely
could grow from making this a sacred space and a home for our community.
It's cool to hear you say that, because coming down to Atlanta and coming from the Canadian Rocky Mountains, I was like, oh, I'm going to be like living in a big city. Like, I don't know how much I'm going to like this. And there is so much like health and wellness here. People are constantly running. There's like so many yoga studios I've met, and maybe it's because I'm part of the yoga community, but I meet so many people who are interested in yoga or want to try it or that sort of thing. And it's really cool. So it's like, I don't want to go down to the city in the South and just like everyone like want to eat fried chicken, because I don't want to eat fried chicken. And I've really loved that about being in Atlanta.
It's so different than what you might think. It's so different than what I thought before I moved here. And it's the biggest small city you'll ever visit, because people are so friendly, and that's what makes a city feel smaller.
Yeah.
When the locals are welcoming. And
Definitely.
I don't know of another place you can go in the country where the locals are as welcoming as they are in Atlanta.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As somebody who came down here knowing like one single person, and I've made this massive community in just a couple months. It's been really cool.
Yeah, we've loved having you.
Yeah, I've loved being here. It gets sad when I think about going home, so kind of like pushing that out of my mind.
You can always visit. We'll get some of those wellness festivals set up, and you can always come visit.
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
Yeah.
So what have been some of the biggest challenges on the business side of owning a yoga studio?
The biggest challenge is making sure that we never have to cancel classes. Just making sure that I'm real organized with the teachers. And there've been a few moments of like, oh my gosh, I don't have a teacher in that slot. I need to run over there and teach. And for me personally, just figuring out how to make a profit without compromising the values of the studio. The way that a lot of studios make more money is by selling retail. And I hesitated to get into retail because that's not what this is about for us. And one of the greatest things I've learned from yoga is not to be materialistic. And so the question was always, how do I balance that? But I have always dreamed of having a little yoga shop where I could sell items that are meaningful to me, because there's so much that helped me on my journey. Things that were essential, books that I read, Eastern Body, Western Mind by Anodea Judith, Journey into Power by Baron Baptiste, the Yoga Sutras. Such a big part of my journey. Essential oils were a really big part of my journey. As I got into yoga teacher training, I learned how to use essential oils to help with my migraines that I had struggled with every day. And so essential oils have always been a big part of my practice in my life. And so I wanted to sell things like the books and the oils. And there's some yoga jewelry, which actually has kept me inspired. I have a necklace I wear by Asha Patel that says Shanti in Sanskrit. And something about wearing an Om or wearing a Shanti reminds me I need to get on my mat. And so it's not about, part of it is a pride in this practice. And people don't always know what it says. I get asked a lot what my necklace says and what it means.
It says it in Sanskrit,
It says it in Sanskrit. And then sometimes people know Sanskrit and they'll see me and they'll go, and that's happened to me a couple times this week where someone said, oh, you're wearing Shanti. And that's really fun, because I wouldn't connect with those people. It's people that you see in passing that I wouldn't have a conversation with, except that they stopped and asked me about my necklace. And then it gives you an opportunity to talk about your yoga. And so my goal is to have a shop where we sell, and it's all coming in this week. So we have a shop where we're selling things that are going to help people become more thirsty for yoga. And so I have essential oils and diffusers coming in. I have yoga mats, good quality yoga mats. I have some Westside Yoga gear, tank tops and sweatshirts that people can wear. I have some yoga pants coming in that we'll be selling. But
cool.
It's not about just gathering or hoarding material items.
Yeah.
It's things that are really meaningful. And so, I was hesitant to move into retail, but doing it in a purposeful way feels very right to me right now, and I do expect that it'll increase our revenues. Mm-hmm. We've been doing well, but there's always more of an opportunity. But my commitment is to sell items that are helpful and help people grow in their practice.
Like something that you would like personally, and that it's meaningful to you.
Everything we're selling is something that has been meaningful to me personally. Like there's nothing that I'll be selling that isn't been a valuable part of our journey.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about sales, because sales has a whole like sort of stigma around that word in general, just the way it's kind of developed in society today. But if you can sell something that you feel really passionate about, I feel like that's when sales is effective. That's when people can, like when you can say, tell a story about your necklace, and somebody's like, cool, I want that too. Like, I want that necklace. When it's just like, oh, here's this thing that I want to sell so I can make money. People don't feel any connection to it, and then it's not going to sell.
Yeah, I think we connect to the feeling. If I can describe how it makes me feel, mm-hmm. then people connect, and it draws them in.
Yeah, definitely. What are some of the biggest things that you've learned sort of along your journey as a studio owner? I'm sure there's quite a few.
I've learned to look for the good in people. One of the things that was hard to me in the beginning is we would have students come in who clearly were not happy in the class. Mm-hmm. And I had to not take that personally and love them anyway.
Yeah.
And so being really committed to someone who clearly seemed frustrated with me, but try to send them as much good positive energy and not get upset, but turn the conversation around in my mind from being something of, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not, they're not accepting me, or blaming them, and making it something like, this person needs a little more of my energy right now. What can I do to accommodate them more? And coming very much from a place of service. I've learned to serve much more deeply than ever before in my life. And there's a surrender that happens every time I walk in the studio where I say, okay, I'm not here for me. I'm here for my students.
Yeah.
And having to keep reconciling with that and not let my ego get in the way.
Yeah. That's a hard thing as a teacher in general, is kind of like putting yourself out of it and remembering that it's not about you. Like, it's not your practice. It's not your time. It's all about your students.
Right.
And it is hard when you see like sort of the death glare, or you see the frustration, or you feel it. You feel that they're upset that you're cueing them into this. They don't want to do it. I know that's something that I've struggled with the most as a teacher, and just coming from a place of like not sending that back at them, but just being like, it's okay. Just have compassion for yourself. Just breathe through it. You'll be fine.
And sometimes what I've learned is I have to believe, for people who don't believe in themselves, I have to believe in them. Mm-hmm. And that has been something that I have said to my students a lot, like, I believe you can do this. So even if you're not there yet, I believe you can do this.
Yeah. And knowing what you know now from after opening your studio for 7 months, is there anything you would do differently pre-opening, at the start of your opening? Or do you feel like you kind of just learned everything along the way?
I'm struggling to think of what I would do differently.
Yeah.
Because everything feels like it's unfolded the way it was intended.
Yeah.
I have such a sense of peace over this journey.
Yeah.
I might not have taught quite as many classes as I did, but it's hard to say that because it was essential. I didn't want to go into debt opening the studio any more than I had to. I had to spend some money to open the studio. But it was really important to me not to be in debt very long, and I was able to make my money back in a couple of months.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So I don't have any regrets. I don't know, maybe I would have put the word out a little more about teachers. That has been one of the harder things, is finding teachers that align with the vision. But I can't think of much that I would do differently.
Yeah. Was most of your finding teachers just like people you already knew in the community, or people finding you, or because you didn't actually post? Like,
it was word of mouth. No,
okay.
Nobody found me. That's the hard thing about opening a studio, unless you have a really strong network, which I didn't, because I had been working for myself and doing a lot with my family the past few years.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't practicing. I was practicing at home every day and not going to a lot of studios, so I didn't have a big network of teachers to call upon.
Yeah.
So it, I just might have gotten out a little more and met more people.
Yeah. Has marketing been one of the challenges in general with the studio? Or have you found that that's pretty...
I haven't spent a ton of time on marketing because I wanted this to grow organically. It was really important to me that this community grow organically.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of studios that will do a lot of things like special offers and Groupons, and I wanted this to be more about building community and word of mouth. And so I did talk to a lot of my friends about what I was doing and asked for their support.
Yeah.
So, I mean, marketing is challenging, but I've just been really intentional about the word of mouth and the relationships, building relationships, and asking my teachers to help with that too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So just one last question for you. Any plans for the future? As I know, obviously Westside's grown a lot, and now you're president of the Atlanta Integrative Medical Center, which is amazing.
Yeah, our plan, so Atlanta Integrative Medical Center is in the same building with Westside Yoga, and our plan is for this to be a one-stop shop for wellness, where our clients can come and take a yoga class and get a massage and see an integrative doctor and have acupuncture all in the same day, see a nutrition coach. We offer a wide variety of services, everything from weight loss programs to natural and medical skincare to immunotherapy and IV therapy. And so we want to be that place that you go to become the best version of yourself. And it's something that I wanted after struggling with my autoimmune disease for years and years. I wish I had a place that I could just go and feel like every visit brought me closer to a healthier life. And so it's really exciting to be able to create for others what I never had for myself when I needed it the most. And so I'm working really closely with Dr. Tim Nguyen, who is a medical doctor, but also has a background in Eastern practices, and he blends the best of Eastern and Western medicine to create a balanced approach to healthcare.
That's incredible. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. It's been really incredible to chat with you today and learn so much more about the studio and the medical center and that sort of thing. And there'll be links on the show notes so that people can find the studio and learn more about what you're doing in Atlanta.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be a part of your podcast. And I hope that everyone who listens will come visit when they get to Atlanta.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So hopefully everyone out there really enjoyed the interview with Amber Berry. If you want to learn more about Westside Yoga, it's www.westsideyoga.net. And if you're interested in the Atlanta Integrative Medical Center, I have a link on the show notes. So that's at www.mbomyoga.com. But if you just look up Atlanta Integrative Medical Center, it'll definitely pop up for you there. And if you want more information, visit the website for show notes. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, definitely send me an email at info@mbomyoga.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you're enjoying the podcast, join the community on Facebook. It's Mastering the Business of Yoga. And join the newsletter. I send out newsletter updates on new episodes, what's new on the blog once a week. And if you sign up for that, I'll send you a free ebook. So definitely no harm in putting your email in there. And that you can find just on the website under the newsletter tab. As always, thanks so much for listening. Bye for now.